Welcome to episode 24 of Motivating Mondays, a weekly podcast and YouTube series dedicated to help Canadian job developers and other employer engagement professionals develop the tools, resources, expertise, and network to excel in achieving sustainable employment outcomes for their students or clients. My name is Christian St. Cyr, National Director of the Canadian Job Development Network, and today we're going to talk about how much or how little job seekers are willing to do to support their own job search. Often the most influential thing that you can do as a job developer is helping people do a better job of developing their own job leads. Many years ago, too many years ago, I was working in a job I didn't particularly like for a person I neither liked nor respected. I was desperately unhappy and needed to make a change. I saw a job advertisement for a youth employment counselor in a small rural town. I didn't know much about or anything about the career development sector or what it took to be a youth employment counselor. In fact, it was just a few years after Service Canada had handed over employment services to private contractors, so even the career development sector was barely existing at this point. What I did know is that I was at the time working for a large Canadian corporation and I didn't want to do this work anymore. I had several years of experience working in the nonprofit sector, developing youth programs, and most recently was a manager who regularly hired and trained youth. So I felt like I had some transferability there. I vowed to myself that I would do everything in my power to get that job. If there was anything that I had control over, I was going to do it as well as I possibly could. I dissected that job posting to address every element I could for both my resume and my tailored cover letter. I dressed in a suit, I drove down to the employment center, I asked to speak to the manager and handed her my resume personally with a quick elevator pitch to express my interest in the position. I researched everything I could about the organization and the Youth Employment Center, and I even practiced interview questions. When I was finally invited in for an interview, I came with questions prepared, I dressed and acted as professionally as possible, and I used my practice to be engaged and positive and enthusiastic. I wrote out questions ahead of time. I brought along multiple copies of my resume and cover letter, just in case there were other people who were interviewing me who didn't have a copy of their own. The next day, I wrote a very professional thank you note, and I went down to the office to drop it off in person for the manager. When I was called in for a second interview, I repeated all of that preparation over again, the planning, and again, when I came in, I was on my very best behavior, and I was prepared as I possibly could be. When I was asked for references, I had them ready and typed with multiple copies. As it turned out in the end, I was offered the position and I was very pleased to accept the offer. It has laid the foundation of my entire career in the career development sector. But, interesting anecdote, about 6 months after I was hired, I was attending the staff Christmas party and I overheard my boss say, "I only hired Christian because he sent me a thank you note." My entire career to this point, more than 25 years in the career development sector, came down to remembering to send a thank you note. Little ripples turn into giant waves over the course of time. You never know what is going to be that one thing that makes the difference, the insightful comment that impresses the employer in an interview, or the one derogatory comment that turns the employer off. Even now, all these years later, I can look back on it and how I approached that job search and say with a great deal of certainty that I think I did just about everything I could to improve my chances, and yet it all came down to remembering to send a thank you note. How good are your clients or students at job search? Let's be honest. I think we all have a spectrum of capability. Someone with little or no experience with computers is going to be more challenged than someone who's grown up with them. Someone for whom English is not only a second language, but perhaps one that they've been recently exposed to, is going to be far more challenged with communication than someone who was born speaking English. People have genuine challenges that are rooted in areas such as education and training, or disabilities, or culture, or demographics, or perhaps they've just never had a role model or the mentorship necessary to understand the expectations of employers. I don't believe everyone should meet the same standard in job search, frankly. You may have a client who needs a lot of support in preparing their resume or their cover letter or in completing an online application. You might need to call them to remind them to go to the interview in the morning or for interpretation when reviewing a job posting. This is the question. Is this person, the person I'm working with right now who's right in front of me, is this person doing everything they can do to secure the position? My wife and I talk about experiences being a 10. That if we go to Disneyland, for example, that perhaps we don't have a meltdown or a child who demands to go back to the hotel halfway through the day, and that no one gets a migraine. When all those things go right, we call that day a 10. Now, to another person, our 10 day might be a 5. They might say, are you telling me that you waited 90 minutes for the Pirates of the Caribbean, that it rained, and they were sold out of churros? What a terrible day. And even though all of those things might have happened on my 10 day, I know that a member of my family could have had an emotional meltdown, or a kid who wanted to quit halfway through the day, or someone got a migraine. So in my mind, this really was a successful day. It was definitely a 10. We need to calibrate our expectations based on the person that we're working with. I have interviewed hundreds of people in my career, and the one thing that always strikes me is that often the person you think will get the job, the person who looks best on paper, often doesn't do very well. Many times these leading candidates are unprepared, unresponsive, disorganized, late, critical, sloppy, or disinterested. It's often someone who's really eager and well prepared that most impresses me. When I coach people in job search, I'm fond of saying that effective job search is about doing 100 things as well as possible. One of those things might be to have a tailored resume, and another might be applying for a job the same day that it's posted. One of those things might be stating the most availability when completing an online job application, while another might be having a well-prepared elevator pitch. There isn't a specific list of 100 things, but there is this idea of questioning whether a job seeker is doing everything that they're capable of doing. We often give clients a free pass because we know that they have challenges. Essentially, we're expecting less of them than they are really capable of doing. We need to strive for best practices in the career development sector. Once a client or student has a lousy resume, well, then we look back on it and we're like, well, at least they wrote it themselves. This is going to be of very little consequence to the employer who's reviewing that resume. How many times do we see clients failing to do the very basic things that would make a real difference in job search? Instead of tailoring a resume and a cover letter to a few employers where they might be a really good fit, they're out there papering the internet with hundreds of email applications with nothing but a generic resume and maybe a cover letter. We need our clients to summon the internal motivation to do as much as they're capable of doing. We need them to say, I am tired of getting what I've always been getting, and now I'm prepared to do something that is going to make a real difference. We need them to understand that all the well-intended encouragement in the world is not going to make a difference if they don't care about their changing their lives more than you do. You may indeed be a brilliant job developer or employer engagement specialist or a co-op educator. In fact, I don't even doubt it because, of course, you're here today. And while we spend a lot of time each week talking about better connecting with employers, the single activity that you do every day that is going to make the biggest difference in your success as a job developer is making sure your clients or students are doing the very best job they can of representing themselves. We titled today's presentation, Shooting for 100% in Job Search. 100% is not reasonable, but it is aspirational. Work with your clients to help them shoot for 100% and not just enough to complete the task. Don't be just a job developer, be a job development manager. Your clients are your crew. Spend your time motivating them, encouraging them, and accepting nothing less than their very best work, their very best effort. If your clients or students are doing their very best, it will do far more to support your reputation with employers than if they're doing just enough, and thereby slowly eroding your reputation with local employers. Last week, we were thrilled to announce that this year's schedule for the annual Labour Market Workshops, they're taking place respectively in British Columbia and Ontario. In BC, the in-person workshop is taking place in Vancouver on November 28th, with the online version on December 1st. Mark your calendars. In Ontario, the in-person session is taking place in Toronto on December 5th, and the online version is taking place on December 8th. Now, we've been doing these labor market year in review workshops for more than 20 years, and for many career professionals, this is their annual opportunity to stay on top of the very latest labor market information. Plus, until September 25th, we're offering everyone who registers a 35% discount on their registration. Click on this link if you want more information, or one of these two links. Just a reminder, the National Networking Day for Job Developers is taking place next week. It's Friday, September 19th. We still have some space in some communities, but if either of those are not available to you, we also have the modified online version. If you want to reserve your space, just visit jobdevelopment.org/NND. Thank you so much for joining us. Please click the like or subscribe button in your platform. Search for Motivating Mondays wherever you download podcasts. We also like you to follow us on our YouTube channel, and or rate or review the podcast. And now we do these sessions live and for free every Monday morning on Microsoft Teams with job developers from across Canada. And it'd be so great if you could join us on a regular basis. Just go to jobdevelopment.org to learn more information. If you have any questions, send us an email, info@jobdevelopment.org. Thank you so much for your time, and have an amazing week.